Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch, and welcome today to a brief review of what is surely the hottest and arguably also the best Tudor watch currently on the market, the BB58 GMT. I think it's telling that Tudor now regularly drops the hottest single watch of watches and wonders. They've done this a few years in a row now, and this year, for 2 weeks in April, my entire Instagram feed was full of Tudors, in particular this Tudor. Not to be confused with the Black Bay Pro though, which is also a GMT. Tudor has now had a couple of cracks at doing a small form factor four-hander. Now, I spent some time with the Pro in 2022. It looked great. It had a very Rolex Explorer 2 style fixed steel bezel, but it was thick, coming in at 14.6mm. That is rather a lot considering the diameter dimension is only 39mm. Enter the new BB58 GMT with a new, slimmer Tudor in-house caliber, the MT5450-U. This bad boy is barely thicker than the three-hander, coming in at a much more reasonable 12.9. It doesn't sound like a huge difference, does it? But we watch people are very, very particular, and it may only be 1.7mm, but put differently, that's 15%, which is a lot given just how small these little objects on our wrist actually are. So after a couple of months now, the 58 GMTs are beginning to filter onto the market, and I happen to know someone who just bought one, none other than Mr. P, Stephen, my business partner at EREBUS. Stephen is on very good terms with his Tudor dealer, having bought a Pelagos 39, a Ranger, and the new FXD, all in the space of the last 18 months or so. In fact, he's on such good terms with his dealer that he managed to snag what was only the third 58 GMT that they had got in. Thank you for the loan, as always, my friend. Well, the movement may be new, but there's nothing new about the packaging. It's all standard Tudor stuff here. What is also standard is a class-leading 5-year warranty. There is no need even to register, and it is fully transferable if you happen to be a flipper, not that Mr. P is a flipper. And the watch should now be pretty familiar to most people who have even the vaguest interest in Tudor. The brand launched the original, in inverted commas, 39mm form factor BB58. The name, by the way, alludes to 1958 when they launched their first 200-meter diver back in 2018, and they have been steadily milking the moniker ever since then, with versions of the same case in blue, in gold, in silver, in bronze, and now this GMT. One thing I did notice pretty quickly, and it's fairly obvious from this side-by-side comparison with my own 58, is that the crown on the GMT is noticeably smaller than on any of the others. My guess is that it's a comfort consideration. Small crowns are generally less noticeable on wrist than large crowns, although I certainly wasn't complaining about the crown on my BB58, and I'm not sure who was. Anyway, dimensions and specifications. You've had a couple of those already. Diameter is 39mm, of course. Thickness, as discussed, 12.9. Lug to lug is a thoroughly appropriate 47.5. 20mm between the lugs. The full rivet bracelet tapers down to 16 and back up to 18 at the clasp, by the way. And as sized, it weighs in at 145 grams. Absolutely spot on for this size of stainless steel watch. Water resistance isn't actually stated on the dial or the case back, but it is 200 meters, otherwise it would not fit into the BB58 range. Crystal is box dome sapphire, and as mentioned, the movement is a Tudor MT5450-U. Which Tudor don't show you on this particular watch. They go for one of their more traditional semi-sterile casebacks instead. But here's what you would see if you could see. They're pretty attractive movements. They're not super ornately decorated, but they are nicely manufactured, and this one has all of the bells and whistles. It's a true GMT, of course. It has 34 joules, a 4 Hz beat rate, and a 65-hour power reserve. It is not only COSC, but also METAS certified. That means it has been tested for water resistance, magnetic resistance, and accuracy in no less than 6 different positions and at 2 different levels of power reserve. METAS is like COSC++ then. And it's worth noting that Tudor's 5-year guarantee does not include the stipulation for any servicing requirements during that period, so they are fully expecting their movements to be operating within those parameters for at least 5 years from purchase. The case should also be pretty familiar by now. It's the same high polished flanks, brushed upper lug surfaces and tapering high polished chamfer connecting the two, as you'll find on the rest of the 58 range. Now the bezel on this one is sloping, and as a consequence it's rather thin at its coin edge. That's okay though, because this is not a dive watch, don't forget. It's a travel watch that just happens to be rather waterproof. A thin bezel is an advantage therefore, because you're unlikely to knock it out of position accidentally. It's a 48 click bidirectional bezel. Now Tudor have some of the best bezel actions in the business. This one is no different. People are still referring to this as a Coke bezel. Maybe it's a caffeine-free, sugar-free Coke to help explain the gold. The unguarded crown features the Tudor rose. Like I said, it's noticeably less protruding than on other 58 models. The faux rivet bracelet is a straight up carryover from the regular 58s. It's a perfectly decent bracelet with female end links, although having said that, I wear my 58 on an aftermarket Jubilee, as you saw earlier. However, unlike the regular 58, the GMT gets the T-fit clasp. This clasp is the business. This clasp is the best in the business. It gives you about 1 centimetre of adjustment, the same amount of adjustment you get from Rolex's glide lock system, but in a much neater, much more compact and altogether therefore much more appropriately sized package. This clasp debuted on the Pro in 2022 but has yet to find its way onto the base 58. The base 58 that cost nearly 6,000 Australian dollars, by the way. Dial and hands are unmistakably Tudor. You don't see snowflakes on any other big brand. You really don't see snowflakes on anything else outside of modified Seikos, frankly. Although for the GMT, they have chosen a lollipop second hand rather than a snowflake as on the three-handers. All indices are applied on top of a mildly textured matte black dial with the classic triangle at 12, rectangles at 6 and 9 and small circles everywhere else. Now all the indices, like the handset, are edged in gold today, and all of the lume is photina'd today. That combined with the half black, half burgundy mottled aluminium bezel insert gives the GMT an overtly retro look. More on that later. There is a date complication at the 3 and a small beveled frame. It even has a sepia date wheel matching the photina'd indices. And thank you Tudor for keeping the dial text on this one to a minimum. Well, I say minimum, they managed 3 lines above the pinion and 2 beneath it, but believe me, for Tudor, that seems to be the minimum that they can actually manage. This watch isn't cheap, but 2 of the main reasons for that are on screen right now. What do you think of the looks, by the way? There is absolutely nothing new here, I grant you, but that's not the point. This one couldn't be more retro if it wanted to be. And on wrist, it is a pleasure to wear, it really is. It's got a heap of presents for a sub 40mm watch. You've got the chamfers, the high polished chamfers on the lug edges, you've got that big piece of crystal giving some nice distortion, and you've got all of that gold, particularly the hands, glinting away occasionally as they see fit. Of course, I am biased. I've basically got the same watch without the GMT and the date complications, and I love that, so no surprises therefore that I love this one as well. You definitely see and feel a considerable difference in thickness between this and the BB Pro. I wonder how many BB Pro owners will be looking to trade into this one over the coming months and years. Legibility is okay, if not outstanding. It's not a massive watch, and you never quite get the same pop from photina'd hands and indices as you do from stark white ones, for example. But as mentioned, this is not an out-and-out dive watch. If you want ridiculous legibility, perhaps look at the Pelagos 39 instead. You know, the Pelagos range is awesome for that at-a-glance reading, stark white on black, etc, etc. Talking of which, what do you think of that date complication? There's no Cyclops on this watch, so the date is not massively obvious, but then again, there is a decent bit of colour contrast, which definitely helps. But the weight is fantastic. You've got a lovely taper from 20 to 16 on the bracelet, the adjustability of this T-fit clasp. I think for the average size wrist in stainless steel, it really doesn't get much better than this. But it's time for the moans and niggles section. I did say this was arguably the best Tudor in the current catalogue, but I'm still going to complain about a few things, of course. Starting with availability. This isn't an easy watch to buy brand new from a dealer, at least not right now anyway. I mean, it launched in April, and if Stephen got the third one that particular dealer got in late June, it shows you how few of these are actually being made available for purchase. If you're watching this video in 2026, perhaps demand will have died down, but at the moment it outstrips supply. So you're going to have to do the most sickening of things in the world. You're going to have to create a relationship with your AD. Lume is never amazing on Black Bay 58s, and indeed the Lume is not amazing on this Black Bay 58 GMT. The Fotina puts it at a disadvantage straight away, and I'm sure you've already noticed there's no lume of any kind on that aluminium bezel insert. Practically speaking, it's okay, but it's not going to win any competitions for lume. And I know that people love to hate on collar GMTs, with only a true GMT like this satisfying the purists. From a technical standpoint, of course, it's a more complicated complication and goes some ways to justifying the price. But the fact remains that as a rotation piece, it's going to take you a couple of minutes to set the date every single time you wear the watch. It's a bit of a pain in the bottom that most people don't take into consideration when they wax lyrical about true GMTs. And there were a few murmurs at the time this watch was released about Tudor's use of gold. This overtly retro look was everywhere 5 years ago, but it's not as common in 2024. Indeed, Tudor themselves released a starkly monochromatic Black Bay 41 at the same time as this watch, and you can see that by comparison it does have a much more modern and cleaner look. Now, I still enjoy Fotina and gold, and this look will always have a place in the market, but I would imagine that Tudor will launch a more contemporary colour version next year for people who held off buying this one because it just wasn't their cup of tea. And what's the one thing that I always talk about that I haven't talked about to this point? It's money, of course. These are 6,810 Australian dollars. What was wrong with 6,799 Tudor? Were you desperate for those 11 bucks? Anyway, that is a chunk of change for a watch for sure. I remember when the three-hander Black Bays came out a few years ago, I reckon they were $4,250 here in Australia. Now, exchange rates have varied since 2018, but Tudor prices have definitely grown alongside the brand's desirability since then. Plus, it's not like buying a Rolex with its rock-solid residuals. These will probably hold their value for the next 12 months or so, and then when supply catches up with demand, they will inevitably dip a little. But when you think about it, it's less than $1,000 more expensive than the regular 58 for a date complication, a GMT complication, METAS certification, and a T-fit clasp. That's not actually too bad. And so if that sounds like a lot of complaints today, it really isn't. This watch is fantastic and I love it. As a daily wear watch or as a one watch collection, if you need those extra complications, the date and the GMT, it really doesn't get much better than this, in my eyes anyway. Great size, great fit thanks to the clasp, great brand, great looks. Generally, it's pretty great. Congratulations, Mr. P. You just picked yourself up yet another beautiful watch. So there you have it. Well done for making it all the way to the end of the video. I have reviewed a ton of Tudors in the past. Why not treat yourself by watching one of those videos now? Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you again in the next one.